Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I do truly appreciate it. And I want to talk about a book that I just finished reading today. A book that I just finished reading, and it's by an author that seems to be so beloved by so many, and one that I've been so hesitant to read, and it's probably because of the fans. The fans of the author have maybe unintentionally talked me out of reading Cormac McCarthy books by Cormac McCarthy. But when they talk about an author, a lot of times the fans talk about an author, sometimes they'll insult the author at the same time. And so hearing the things they say, it's often put me off from reading stuff from the author, talking about how dark the writing is, how poorly written, I guess, lack of punctuation and some of that kind of stuff. You hear people talk about that stuff, and so that has been part of what's kept me off of Cormac McCarthy all these years. And then also having seen some of the films based on his work, and then seeing the truly dark nature of some of his stories. I tend, when I read books, I don't tend to want to feel emotional pain. There's enough of that stuff in my life. I tend to try to protect myself, and that's kept me off of a lot of great stories. And I've recently reviewed a book that I read by an author that is beloved in many circles, and her work has been highly lauded, and that would be Kristen Hanna. I read a book of hers, The Great Alone, and felt the pain. Ended up thinking how great of a book that was, even though I didn't like the pain from the book. But anyway, back to Cormac McCarthy. I recently read No Country for Old Men, and I want to talk about it a little bit. I'd seen the movie, the Coen Brothers movie, starring Tommy Lee Jones and Josh Brolin, among others. And I really did like that movie. It was a movie that on my first watching, I left feeling very disappointed. My second watching, I felt like I got it. And I loved it. And I watched the movie maybe 6 months ago again for probably the third or fourth time. And I loved it even more. I've become a big fan of the film. And so I finally talked myself into tipping my toes in the Cormac McCarthy reading world. And so I read No Country for Old Men. I like the movie, so I figured I'd try the book out. And so here's what I thought about the book. Essentially, for a great deal of the book, I'd say probably 2/3, it's almost exactly like the Coen Brothers film. It's so eerily similar that I was on the verge of judging this book on the same way that I would judge The Godfather or The Exorcist as great books that had faithfully adapted movies made for them. And then the last third or so of the book was different than the movie. The movie had to tie things up and sew things up more efficiently at the end in a nice bundle, where Cormac McCarthy kind of went on. I don't want to say droned on, because the stuff at the end of the book was meaningful and impactful, but it really didn't serve to further the story as well. It's just sticking to the story as the movie would. And so just going back a little bit about this book, if you haven't read it, or if you have, or if you've seen the movie, or you have not, it's a great story. It's set in West Texas, Terrell County. The sheriff is the sheriff of Terrell County there. And we start off with Llewellyn Moss. He's a Vietnam vet, and he's hunting antelope. I've been there. I've been near there anyway, Uvalde, Texas. And I would describe it's not quite desert. I don't know. It's rocky, desolate, arid, dry, cactusy, tough country. I don't know. Technically, that wouldn't be called desert, I don't think. But it's rough. West Texas is rough, and it's tough. And so he's out there hunting antelope. He lives in a very small trailer, very small mobile home. And he's married to a young lady, 19 years old. a young lady named Carla Jean Moss, Llewellyn's wife. So he's a Vietnam vet. He was described at some point as being a great, great shooter. So he's hunting antelope, which is a type of animal that you got to hunt from far away because they can see you. And he even mentions how they saw him. He's like, holy cow, they saw me at 700 yards. They know I'm here because they can see me. He's looking through a spotting scope or binoculars, or the scope of his rifle, perhaps, I can't remember. But he mentioned they can see him. And he takes a shot, and he misses, or so he thinks. So he goes out to where the shot was, and he finds blood. He's thinking, dang, I injured one of these animals. And so he doesn't want to leave an injured animal out there. The hunter doesn't want to do that. And he goes to track the animal, and he ends up upon the scene of a shootout. And there's vehicles shot all to heck, dead people laying around. There's one vehicle that's got a badly injured, dying man, and he's asking for water. And Llewellyn says, I ain't got no water. And he ends up finding a bag, a satchel, a case. He finds a case full of money. I think he estimates there's millions of dollars in this case, and some guns. And so he takes a gun or two in this case, and no witnesses. He's gonna take the money and run. It's an opportunity, a risky opportunity, but it's an opportunity. And he goes back home to his wife, and she's kind of like, what's going on? Nothing. What do you got in the case? A case full of money. Yeah, right. What's in the case? But he don't really give her any answers. He doesn't treat her with respect. And, just dismisses her everything. And she admires him, and she's young, and so she sort of takes it. And she has a lot of faith in Llewellyn. And it turns out misplaced faith. But he's lying in bed that night thinking about this dying man that he left, this bandit, this probably a bad guy, assumption is. And he can't live with that. So he gets up and he goes out to go see about this dying man, and that ends up being big mistake. He might have already made some big mistakes, but this is the big one. This is the big one because now he gets found out. They find his truck. He has to go off on foot. They go chasing after him. He gets shot. He makes it home, but his truck is left there on the scene. And now this character, who's the bad guy, the ultimate antagonist in the movie, and probably one of the ultimate antagonists, period. I said movie. Book. The antagonist in the book and the movie. But he won some awards, I think, in the movie. The character, the actor that played Anton Chigurh. Or Sugar. Anyway, now he's on the scene, and I really don't know how he got there. And you'll find at the end we really don't know where he goes either. But anyway, he comes on the scene, and he's one heck of a tracker, and he goes tracking after Llewellyn Moss, and there's no place to go where you can get away. So he goes after him, and he's after the money, but he's also settling up. He wants to make a show of it. He wants to make sure everybody dies. And at the end of the day, he can go to the big bosses and show them that he can clean up the mess and he can run the show. And ultimately, that's his end goal. We find that out later on. But he kills dang near everybody that he comes across. There's an interesting thing that he does when he runs into people that may or may not need to be killed. He gives them a coin and asks them to flip a coin. And so at a store, he ends up having the store clerk flip this coin. The store clerk flips a coin and wins the coin toss. And he says, keep that coin. Don't stick it in your pocket with the rest of them, because that's a special one. That's an important one right there. And he walks off and drives off and lets the guy live. But we're also introduced to Sheriff Bell, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, the sheriff of Terrell County. And he's an old-time sheriff. He feels more like an Old West type of a lawman. And he's a World War II vet. And he won a award for bravery in World War II. I think the Bronze Star. He won an award. But he's an old-time sheriff, an old-time guy. old-time investigator, and he's not only trying to find Llewellyn Moss to solve crimes, but he also needs to find Llewellyn Moss maybe to save his life. And so he's on the case too. And then there's this other fella that shows up. You see, Anton Chigurh has really screwed up things for the crime lords. He's killing off their people. He's a loose cannon. They want him stopped. They want their money back, but they also want him stopped. So they hire a guy named Carson Wells, who has a history with Anton Chigurh. They don't really get too much into their history, but he's got a history with him, and he's a smart fellow. He's a calculated fellow, very intelligent, and he feels like he can get the money back, which is his job, the money in the case, and he can also stop Anton Chigurh, who's messing up everything for everybody. And I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but this is a story that bounces from hotel to hotel, from town to town, and characters come and go. And a few things about the book. I said that the first 2/3 were pretty much spot on with the movie. Well, the last third, it does change. There's characters introduced, and there are also the story. I don't want to say it dawdles, but it meanders off into other directions. Stuff that really doesn't necessarily forward the story, and that's why I'm sure that's why the movie was more abbreviated at the end. Gave us a quicker finish, a quicker finale. But anyway, there's some extra stuff in the book which I find to be very important. Some issues that I had with the book, and I think other readers might have had some of the same things, is you become so invested in a character, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's over. And we'll recap a little bit about what happened, but it's sudden, where all of a sudden you're finding out, what? That person's dead now? Holy cow, we didn't even get the story. And then you get a little bit of the story in the investigation, or in the telling from one officer to the next officer and stuff like that. And so that was an interesting way to do it. It almost, the issue that I have is you invest so much time in a character. You hope for the best. You hope that it works out. And you don't even really get the real-time version of their end of the story. Offhandedly, you go from one scene, this person is doing this, to this person showing up, and you find the body is this person that you've invested time in. So that was a little weird, but I think it was well done. And then I think the big main difference in the book is that when Anton Chigurh and the sheriff in the movie, they kind of go on their own ways, and that's that. Where there's more of a reveal in the movie, more of a reveal of the nature and the past of Sheriff Bell, Ed Tom Bell. You get a little bit more what makes him tick, but also a little bit more information about the weight, the load that people carry. You see, a lot of times people, maybe you see a person's failures, you see their problems, you see their the weight, the chip on their shoulder, whatever it may be. And then other folks, you don't see it. They carry it silently throughout life, and they're their own critic. They're their own crucifier. They hang themselves up on the cross, and they live with that stuff. And I think part of that we get in the book, and we don't get it in the movie. And I think it's interesting. It's tough, but it's interesting as well. And I think that's part of the lessons in this book. There are some lessons that it's a tough world, and all of us have our weaknesses and make our mistakes and have to live with the consequences. And every character in this book ultimately makes mistakes, has weaknesses, and has to live with or pay for their mistakes, whether it be living with it or whether it be dying by it. One way or the other, they all end up dealing with the consequences of their choices, their mistakes, their nature, perhaps, things like that. And I think it's an interesting lesson. in this book, and it's something that makes it very relatable if you're willing to relate to it. But the way I think about this book, it's my very first Cormac McCarthy read, and I loved it. I loved it. I could not wait to get back to it every day, to open that thing up and to read on. And this is the first edition, first print, hardcover version. It's the only version of the book that I have, and it's the best version, obviously, because it's the only one I got. I'd love to have a limited edition version of this book. I'd love to get my hands on one. I'd like somebody to make one. Suntup editions or something like that. I'd love to get a version of this book like that. But I loved the book, and I have to rate it 5 stars out of 5 stars. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but for me, a 5-star book is one that I really, really loved. And that's as simple as I can make it. 5-star read, 5 stars out of 5 stars, No Country for Old Men. And yeah, I think I'm ready to try on something else. I don't know if I'm ready for the road. I've got sons, and the movie was tough enough as it was for me. I don't know if I'm ready for the road, but I think perhaps I'm ready for some other stuff by Cormac McCarthy. And I would recommend this book. I'd recommend this book to people who like westerns, who like dramas, who like action, who like suspense, who like good old stories. I'd recommend the book. It's got some really good characters, some great characters in it. They don't all have good endings, but some great characters that I really enjoyed getting to know. And yeah, it is dark, and it is hard, and it is bloody, and it's brilliant. So, No Country for Old Men, I give it a 5 stars. I really loved it, and I can think of no more lies to tell. So thank you for your time. I do truly appreciate it. C'est la vie, baby. Doo-doo.